revoilà pour cette
troisième
page que nous ouvrons dans cette grande conversation, cette grande journée. C'est la troisième
page,
c'est la dernière page de cette partie de la journée.
That is, in fact,
ceux qui savent,
the last
tiens,
part
et si on faisait
of
un petit
this.
détour par le nuage de mots-clés?
And what about looking at the cloud of words? So we have a big cloud here for the people online. Rethink, reuse, rebuild, relearn. Anyway, you will find all that again on the website. Maybe we will a bit rework the cloud before we put it on the internet. And then let me see. Reload and quite a few terms in RE. And go on, in fact, giving us your words starting with RE. And on the platform, you have the 3 little questions to get some feedback about today. So don't forget that you play an active role in this meeting online, as well as here in the audience. So don't forget, you can raise your hand, ask questions, share your experience, because it is together that we jointly construct the day. This afternoon, we're going to talk about resources, existing resources to better produce. Now, we know that mitigation is not enough today. We have, in fact, to deal with the wounds that they exist. So, restoration of the ecosystem. We have to think about the species that, in fact, exist or existed before. We have to find a model that is desirable and sustainable. And now we're going to talk about initiatives, in fact, experiments, in fact, that give more space to nature, where regeneration is at the heart of everything, and that works for the planet. So for 15 minutes, we're going to listen, maybe dream a bit. We're going to close our eyes or not, because there are things to see on the screen. And we will also make the most of being here together. I'll give the floor to a plastic artist, Jérémy Gobé, founder and CEO of Corail Artefact. So, Jérémy, here we have the audience. They've just had lunch. They're happy to be here. You have a remote control for your slides, and I give you the floor now, and I'll be back later. So, plastic artist, and this didn't frighten you. That's a good sign. Now, maybe this can be a bit surprising. Why is an artist invited here to present his work? Well, my work, in fact, is based on something simple, to draw a line between the past, the present, and the future. And to look at this, taking into account the challenges of the past, present, and future. So the project I developed is called Corail Artefact, or Coral Artefact. Before doing that, I have 13 minutes to tell you all about my life. So, you know that my background led me to work around corals. Now, until now, we've talked about artists, plastic, corals, patents. So 2 examples of works I have done representing my work in general. On the right-hand side, I will ask you, do you have an idea what this is on the right-hand side? What is that, in your opinion? The right-hand side. Do you have an idea?
Exactement, c'est du tricot.
It's knitting. I don't know if you recognize this. We have, in fact, Christmas socks. It's the jacquard knit. So this is a geometrical motif, two colors at least, and not only does it represent the past, but it has also led to the French textile industry at the basis of our economy, and it is also the symbol of our labor fights. The first demonstration was or took place in the north of France in a textile knitting plant, a founding element. Now, it is something that is really part of our history. The first demonstration organized by the Communist Party, in fact, and there was a big demonstration that ended a bit in blood. So it's really at the heart of our labor movements. It's also important from the point of view of all the technological developments. You know that the first computers were invented after, in fact, or the computers were the first application of binary codes, and that technology was there that we used the computers for the first time. So the jacquard knitting is very, very important in France. Now, it's quite extraordinary to have this size here because there is no big jacquard knit production plant. They've been all relocated outside France. And we've also relocated also our labor problems with them, you know. And today, in these places where we relocated that industry, we're beginning to see the first labor movement. So you relocate the technique, the industry, and all the labor challenges also. So anyway, on your right-hand side, this is something that was presented at the 104 in Paris. So the points edges you see represent like coral edges. I think we have something like 1,000 square meters of knitting here. And thanks to that, we reopened, in fact, a production plant to produce that. So this is at the heart of my work, you know. I combine an expertise and know-how. There's also a historical dimension and a topical issue, in this case, relocation and labor fights. On your left, do you know what this is on my left, or on your left, rather? Normally people don't find out, don't guess, but maybe you will. Cotton? Cotton, did you say? It starts with the same letters? Cocoons, yes, silkworms. In fact, another example of how I work. People, you know, give me a lot of freedom in my creation. And for my inspiration, once again, I find inspiration in the past, in the know-how. And in fact, it was a castle transformed into a modern art museum in Italy, in the Piedmont. And there's a huge wood machine in that castle, and no one, in fact, talks about the machine and what's the use. The only thing we know is that there were quite a few machines in that place to put cones of yarn or spools of yarn And I thought, why don't we talk about this place more? And looking into this, doing research, I saw that this was a first weaving plant, and they started with the silkworms and the cocoons, then the yarns, and that was sent to the silk industry in Lyon. And why didn't people talk about this in that place? When you have a unique know-how. Well, the problem is that at the time, only women worked in these plants, and the jobs were unskilled, badly paid. And when you put a cocoon in boiling water, it releases a terrible smell, and in fact, it contaminated people in a way. All the women, had that smell on them. So in a way, it was a sort of trauma. People were a bit ashamed of the whole story. But then I thought, I'm invited here, and what can I do with this story, and with this past history and this present time? Because maybe there are young people who think or imagine that their grandmothers never worked while they worked there. So I did again some research on the cocoons of silkworms, and a cocoon has 1,000 meters of a yarn or thread. So I imagine over a working life, you will draw 500,000 kilometers of yarn. 500,000 kilometers is the distance between the Earth and the Moon. Imagine these women working on that quantity of yarn. So I found that was quite incredible. So I went around in the region, I visited the museums, and I tried to collect all these cocoons, and we were able to produce that work of art. And this is to show the work of these women, in fact. So this embodies a life of work and started an interrelational discussion. So this is to show you the type of work I do. And so I often visit workshops, plants, production plants that close down. And I also go to Emmaüs, these places to find old objects. And in 2010, I discovered under a table corals or coral skeletons. And the first thing I felt, well, in the official version, it's admiration. But in fact, I was disgusted. And I thought I'll never be able to produce the same type of art, work of art as nature. So these corals were beautiful. But also what's incredible is that nature had invented, these shapes, but for given functions. And the coral skeletons are sculpted in such a way for the circulation of water, oxygen, and things like that. So, this is also the values I believe in. So the perfect shape, when I found them, well, they were becoming fossils, so I knew they were going to lose their colors. So the first thing I did was to draw them. And then I did research around the corals. And then I thought, okay, well, I will try and use that as a base to carry out my own work. So I used them as a base. I clicked only once, but here you have the example of a work I did starting with coral. On the right-hand side, you see a zoom in. So we have a coral skeleton. So, I followed the movement of nature invading a space. And there's also a link between the disappearance of corals and contamination by plastic. So I did this sort of thing for a few years until 2017, And there on the left, you have an illustration representing an important meeting for me. I was invited by an association called HS Projet, organizing an international festival of extraordinary textiles. And so there they invite artists who have a connection with the textile and process it in a new way. So I tried to find something interesting in the region, and I discovered what you can see on the right-hand side. That is the traditional lace of Puy-en-Velay, and that traditional lace invented 400 years ago or 450 years ago, point d'esprit. And I thought, well, this is quite incredible, and it's very similar to corals. So as you can see on the left-hand side, a microscopic view of a coral. So we can see the similarity here between the coral and the lace. So this, we talk about industrial fabric when we talk about textile. The living part of the coral is called also, tissue, which is fabric in French. So there are many, many connections. And I thought, okay, what would be interesting is to try and find a solution for these two challenges, a solution to boost textile activities, renew them in this area, and show also how this lace is connected to a big challenge connected to the world of corals. So the idea was to produce work. In fact, did work resembling corals using a lace, and once the work was done, I used it as a base to have corals grow on the lace afterwards. I also did a conference with the Washington Museum, and on the right-hand side you see, in fact, a piece of work that was there in their museum. Let me move a bit quicker because I have 4 minutes left and we've only covered 2/3 of my life. Let me come back. How to make people aware, The work I do is to transmit a message and show also what I can do. I was invited in an art center, which is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture, which is close to Poitiers, a marvelous place. They invited marvelous artists, and it is in an agricultural school. So how to make the people in Poitiers, how to make them become aware of the coral issue. But in fact, the pride of those students in the agricultural school, they're very proud of their production, the landscape, the butter, and they have this thanks to coral, because at the time, in fact, you had coral reefs, in fact, at the same place, which makes it possible today to have quality grass and quality butter. So there's a very close connection between the past, the present, and the future. Protecting coral is very important for us, but it's also where we come from, and makes it possible to get exceptional products thanks to that. And Champagne is also based on former coral reefs in the region. Now, many corals have disappeared, but using, in fact, fossil, I was able to redo these corals and reproduce those landscapes. So I've reproduced with a very simple system, wooden structure, used cloth, and I knitted a new jacquard textile. And so we did the pattern, and the pattern is inspired by the different strata in the soil. Now, we also had some specific sounds, marine sounds like urchins eating, for example. That was a sound that was played during the visit in that exhibit. Now we come to Corail Artefact. So there was this idea of making, works of art, getting message through. And I listed, in fact, all the reasons why the corals disappear. So fishing, climate change, plastic waste, cement waste. So I wanted to once again produce art pieces, but inspired by real things, real problems and challenges around us. So what I'm saying is that today a lot of people want to save corals, but they use materials that kill corals. They try to regenerate the reefs with the concrete, but this kills coral. On top of that, we keep away the local population and things like that. So when we look at the result of all that, great initiatives, but in fact, the situation at the end is worse. So we decided, how can we do better than that? I like to read, to think, to try and find solutions. So I invented two materials, a biopolymer, which is unique, 100% made in France, made in Bretagne, biosourced, biodegradable, and when it downgrades, it's going to feed the medium, and it has elements inside that leads to a faster development of the coral because there are natural nutrients for the coral in that material. So that was the first development. The second one is what I call an environmental friendly concrete, but it's not concrete. In fact, no cement, no sand, but subsoil products. So two materials that are patented, and using the materials, I produce works of art and direct application. So when I say practical solution, so here on the left-hand side, you have an artificial reef, a traditional one in concrete, and it pollutes, and it's not very efficient from the point of view of the shape. And on the right-hand side, you have the solution that I develop. So quite an interesting product. And that's the solution with the lace and coral. I should have insisted on this because that's the interesting part. The coral, you can actually do a cutting like with plants, but there's another type of reproduction. It's a sexual reproduction. So one night a year, you have, in fact, the coral, in fact, that lay their larvae that fall on the ground. Out of the 100 larvae, 30 survive. And because of the climate change, that yield that was well calculated for everything to go well is now, of course, deficient today. So with the lace, the biopolymer, and other interesting elements, the lace, in fact, makes it possible to increase the natural yield without having any impact on the medium. This is what is represented here. And the biopolymer is used also for bonding and cutting and things like that. These materials are adapted to some requests. For example, in Brittany, they want to introduce native oysters, and since there are some incompatibility, I adapt the design and the material for this type of request. Also in the area of cosmetics, for example, a cosmetic mask, I can also use that. So you see the connection between development, industry, and education. Now, I'm only 4 minutes late, but what is very important is education. And I have an educational program freely accessed by children, old people, all these people that are left aside, forgotten sometimes, can in fact have access to all that, and maybe they also have ideas to so that we can find solutions for problems. That is what we do with children. They can knit corals. We have developed an app for children, virtual reality. Something that ended yesterday. It was at La Défense. So this is the ecological concrete I used, 3 meters in height, 4 meters wide. So once again, a work of art within the framework of an exhibition to show that that material I invented can also be used for some type of construction. So different works of art you can see on my website. Don't hesitate. So thank you very much, Jérémy. Thank you.
Jérémy, can I tell you something? Yes, but you see, there was a problem, but in the régie, in fact, you had the 4 minutes. I have a question. Can you stay until at least 4:15 p.m.? Because at 4:15 p.m. we come to the end of this session. Yes? You agree? Until 4:15, yes? So a word in re? Recognition. I think it's good to have a recognition, in line with the past. Thank you, Jérémy. So, Jérémy has sent this inspiration, dream, art. So how can we do this now concretely? There are workshops today, there are experiments underway, and we have concrete cases with Jean-Olivier Michaud and Didier Soufflet. So Jean-Olivier Michaud from La Manufacture 49 and Didier Soufflet from It Kids.
Messieurs, prenez place.
Jean-Olivier, you've come with your tennis shoes. So we're going to speak on concrete elements. Gentlemen, let's go to the heart of this subject. And so, in 30 seconds, can we say, Jean-Olivier Michaud, you're Director General of La Manufacture 49. You already have a microphone. So, I am working for the Eram Group. Eram has 9 fashion brands, and we are a manufacturer of shoes. Didier? So, It Kids is a brand. In fact, we have Jacadi So about a group with 1 billion in turnover, some 300 shops. Thank you very much for having completed this presentation. So in 23 minutes, 46 seconds, we're going to talk about repairing the production modes. We're going to talk about very concrete, practical examples. So you have a problem with regards to the recycling of your shoes. Can you tell us a bit about the technical challenges that you're faced with? Yes. So, in fact, we're obviously looking for solutions. We are interested in cotton because that is children's favorite fiber. So, for several years now, we have in fact launched certain work, for certain standards. We have a bio certification, and we've invested in recycling as well, because we consider that to be one of the solutions of the future. The challenges are great. We have launched two major approaches. The first, perhaps the easiest, is to take the production scrap material, and today we can in fact make 10 million t-shirts for Kiabi using the production scrap. It's simple, technically speaking. It's complicated. We have to, really be familiar with your partners, the spinners who can treat this scrap material, and so you have to have a good mastery of the industrial train. The other aspect that we started 4 or 5 years ago is to start with the used clothing to be able to make recycled cotton, which is complicated, more complicated. We started with a partner, which is a technical center for the city. With the city, we financed an industrial demonstrator that began 3 or 4 months ago to try to test all of these steps using the cotton from the TLC. Here, there are many challenges. First of all, where do you buy your cotton? It has to be sorted. That's costly. As far as these sorters are, setting up different initiatives now. But technically speaking, each step in the process, when you use recycled textiles, the machines, the threads that you're going to have to process, etc. You have prices here. The more material you use, the more expensive the source. And then you have to have a constant quality level as well, because we're taking TLCs, in fact, and you have a quality level which is not standard. And this according to the sourcing. Today, we've wanted to go to the end of the process. We have produced 35,000 pieces. You have 60% TLC cotton, 40% virgin cotton. And so you have a thread which is 100% cotton, which is 60% used cotton. So we're in a second phase today. And, for the moment, we are still looking at the problem of the perceived quality. What are the, in fact, potential defects? Whether we should be using polyester. So what we want to do is take that TLC and to give the customer a quality which is equivalent to virgin cotton. Thank you for that experience.
Jean-Olivier, vous, autre cas concret, autre expérience. Alors, c'est la chaussure
Another
Cécile,
concrete
c'est ça,
example.
Comment vous l'expliquez d'ailleurs à l'enfant que
Can
je suis,
you,
comment vous expliquez
how
la
do you
chaussure
explain the Cécile shoe to a child? The Cécile is a sneaker that can be repaired. This comes from our manufacturer. And, you know, here the idea is to highlight the know-how, the expertise to produce shoes in France with materials from a short circuit. The further supplier is 1,300 kilometers from the workshop. So the Cécile is 4.5 kilos of CO2, whereas a sneaker from Asia would be 3 to 4 times more. So here we're talking of repairability. It's not a question of producing a sneaker like any other. The goal here is to work on its lifespan. As far as repairability is concerned, well, you know, as far as sneakers are concerned, we have a system to disassemble the shoe. And so here, depending on the use that varies, we recover the shoes, we recondition them in the workshop, and then so in fact the customer buys a pair of shoes and a repair kit? No. No, he buys his shoes. When his shoes are worn, he contacts us. We exchange pictures to see whether or not we can repair them. In 90% of the cases, they can, in fact, be repaired. And so this is a pair that was sent back to us. Here, the right foot is the way they were when he sent them to us, and the left-hand side is the shoe we repaired already. And so you see, so there's an environmental impact here because these are repairable. Well, there's a dual impact. There's an impact as far as the new product is concerned. This is a short circuit, so you have a limited impact. We use recycled raw materials as well. But then the repair is going to prolong the lifetime of the product. So we divide by 2 the carbon footprint. Another concrete action, Didier, you know, we're very, very concrete here. So what's ID-Truck? ID-Truck is a second-hand sales system we developed a few years ago in a number of our brands. I know other brands have done it as well. This is a system whereby the customer can bring his used articles, his children's clothing, and bring them to the store. And so there is a second-hand display in the store, and if we sell it, we give the money, the total sum of the sale to the customer, and we do not take a commission. And so this is something that we were mentioning earlier, you know, the recycling aspect. As long as the product can continue to be used as such is ecological. And for the customer, he can, base himself on the fact that the secondhand product is bought from the store, so he can have confidence. Okay. Fine. So, ID-Truck. Jean-Olivier, you also innovate with a shoe rental offer. Can you say a few words about that? So the Atelier Bocage was launched 5 years ago. It's a co-designed project with the industrial side, which works on reconditioning, and the brand, which has worked on the marketing. So, in fact, in the bocage stores, you have 2 months whereby the customer either buys the shoe after 2 months or brings it back. In that case, it goes to the workshop, it's reconditioned, and then sold as a second-hand product at bocage in our stores. Are there now, we work with the Bocage brand, which is a quality brand. So in 2 months of use, the shoes are still in very good condition, and we really have very low waste. They get resold very easily. Any questions in the audience? I have a question. I see a hand raised here. Yes. Yes, you have a question?
Bonjour, Céline Puyarveau, Galerie Lafayette.
Galerie Lafayette, Céline. I would like to know what was the reaction of customers when you propose, in fact, 100% cotton, of which 60% is recycled and 40% new cotton. So do you have any differences in which percentage of T-shirts are sold? Well, I don't think we've done enough analysis of the customer feedback on this. Initially, we wanted to present the product in the product range, not really separately. But it is slightly different because it starts at 15 euros, whereas a new T-shirt is more expensive when using totally new T-shirt. And the T-shirt was, in fact, identified as being 60% recycled cotton. We can feel that we're just at the beginning of the process. This is why we started with 30% of production scrap material. We have started with this educational approach, and because of the quantity, etc., to show what we're doing to the customers. We've had some reaction in the stores. People say, no, I don't want to use recycled materials for a baby, especially during the COVID period, etc. So, people didn't really want to have recycled materials. But with the educational approach, little by little, we show that this is something that's normal. There are no problems with recycling materials. Some people wanted to know, was it less resistant? Was it, in fact, deteriorated? Even if you have a few differences, which we accept, in fact. So here we start again saying that we're going to communicate more on the environmental aspect, whereby the perceived quality is the same. And so this is why we can't really develop the quantity as long as they're not all sold. So how do you accompany the consumer in buying these products, in fact? Is this a new purchasing experience for the customer? If we talk about the Cécile sneaker, we have customer feedback which is extremely positive, because here we didn't expect this, but I must say the results have been positive. We have a wow effect with this. And at Bocage, people have also positive feedback, because you can actually touch and try out the shoe. Do you accompany the customer to explain that it's a virtuous approach, etc., etc.? On Cécile, yes, because that's the whole idea behind the brand. When you're in a store, in a Bocage store or corner, it is the role of the customer advisor to explain what we're doing, then quite sincerely, there's the price appeal as well of these reconditioned shoes. Today, to explain what we're doing is a real challenge because we have other challenges. We have other projects as well. We've come to understand that from the industrial point of view, the sourcing point of view, we know how to do it. But as far as the sale of the product is concerned, here we're going to have to deploy a lot of pedagogy. There are two breaks on this reconditioned shoe. One is hygiene, and the other thing is that people have already put their foot in the shoe. So the shoes have been treated for bacteria, etc. So from that point of view, that's done. But you have to explain that to the customer because there are certain beliefs among people, and we have to show that we, with our process, we can bring confidence and quality to them. And I think that will be the real challenge, is to sell the product. Yes? I'd like to come back with regards to the cotton in your product. In fact, you're only using material that belongs to you already. Do I understand from, because you speak of your own production scraps? We try to source the standard CHF, and then we have a European collector for this. The man has to speak in the microphone. If you want to enrich the product, you can put polyester, but maybe that could cut you off from future sourcing. Because if you had to reintegrate it, no, that's what I was saying, that from the outset, to have 100% cotton is not the ideal situation. But quite frankly, I'd rather advance in a certain direction. We say that if we want to capture 30-40% of cotton from CHF and integrate it into new clothing, so either you're at 40 or 60 or 50 and 50% polyester, then it could lead to problems afterwards if we want to then rework that product, resource it. So what we're doing today, in fact, is say, if we don't test this, well, we won't know where we are. So what we're trying to do is, once you've created a need, we're going to have our sorter collectors propose a material by material sorting. That's an investment. That's an industrial investment, So we're in a certain approach. Obviously, it's not ideal. I have questions from online. Sometimes very short, so in my mind I think this is a short question, but it's not that simple. What are the treatments to sterilize the CHFs? Well, you can treat them at the source, and I don't think they're standard. Some others might be able to speak of this in the room. So you have these standard processes, So there's also it's not just shredding it, but, we also dye them, and the washing, etc. You have, the different cycle, which is going to destroy any foreign bodies. You've always got certain threads which might not be cotton, but from the health point of view, there are no dangers. Jean-Olivier, can you tell us the cost of repairs? So today for Cécile, it's 59 euros. But if we work on a bocage product, we're not speaking of the same thing. Yeah.
Jean-Olivier aussi pour la basket.
59 for both.
Faut-il pour la réparer en moyenne?
So, how much time does it take to repair?
On va changer la semelle et on va changer la première
Well,
intérieure.
we're going to change the sole and the first inside layer. That's not exactly an answer. In service, how would you want? Your question, could you, for the two speakers, and this is linked to something I want to talk about, the question of cooperation, partnerships. I know you both work with CETI. So have you called upon outside services for these projects, or do you only work with internal teams? So yes, you work with others. At the same time, let me say that as far as our experience is concerned, it's important to have the in-house competence and skills on such a subject. It's obvious to have partnerships. We have partnerships, of course, and we have, we have hired technicians, engineers, people who master the entire chain. I think this is something that's really important. Jean-Olivier, you work with other brands which have nothing to do with your target group. Yes, we've developed a lot of in-house competence and know-how, but we also have partners. We have a big project with the CETIA in the Basque Country for the optical recognition of products, to know what the materials are, the dismantling of the product, and then recycling. This is something that we've been working on for some time. And then something which is smaller, we're working on a project with the collector sorter Jimitex, and the idea is to see how we can get out of shoes which have been collected and which cannot be used for combustion, in fact. So we work together. There's the sourcing, there's the technical specs that we've worked on to try to see how to sort the shoes. The second step is the reconditioning, which is what we do in our workshops with a certain number of constraints so as to respect the economic criteria. And the third step is the resale. This is quite extraordinary, but if we're able to really scale this up, then we can in fact put shoes back on the market without having consumed any new materials, any new resources. Maybe a word in R. Yes, reformat, because I come back to the market and customer. If we want to advance, if we want to deploy more second-hand objects, especially in terms of footwear, then we need to re-explain. So this is why I say reformat mindsets. Recycle would be too easy. Yes, of course. I like the idea of perseverance. So maybe try again, retry. Is this important? Yes, because there's some things that work and some that don't. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So this morning we closed our eyes and projected ourselves towards 2050. This afternoon, open your eyes wide, not to go into the past, but to explore the frontiers, which aren't that far. Like all frontiers, we're going to try to differentiate between what's real and what seems to be real. So we're going to have with us, in fact, Quentin Hersinger, President Matériaux, Adrien Rivière, co-founder of Design Fiction Studio, Lars Vignon, Sales Development Manager for Pluralism, and Hélène Daré, Director of the Brand Pole at Refashion. Good afternoon. Have a seat. I think this is the rare situation where we are divided. So we start here with Adrien. Adrien, I'd like to give you my role. I have spoken of the frontier between what's real and what appears to be real. So you are co-founder of Design Fiction Studio. Can you tell me what that is? Yes, let's start there. Good afternoon. So here we're talking what's real and what seems to be real. So we're going to talk about the Design Fiction Studio very rapidly. I think that some of you probably know the Design Fiction. Design Fiction Studio is somewhere on the border between design and fiction. We can talk about the narrative, forward-looking narratives. Let's try to imagine tomorrow, 2030, 35, 40, 45, and this, what is the future of the textile sector? What is the value chain? What you can do, what you can no longer do, how the world has evolved. You've all seen science fiction movies and series. So the narrative is very important, and you're going to see this very quickly. This allows you to visualize things. Before the story, you can project yourself, start to visualize things. Then you have design. The fact that you're projecting yourself into the future, you're beginning to think of what's happening, how society evolves, consumer behavior. Are we going to give preference to usage, so rental rather than purchase? So here we see a very significant purchase, so a very significant trend and then we can go to an even greater trend where in fact purchase is no longer the principal approach, how the economies are going to change. And this is how design comes into play, because with design you can choose certain elements that you really want to work with. Maybe a new experience, new decision-making chain between the different players. So the objective of design fiction is to start with the complexity of the present challenges, which we all know are very, very complex. And what I'm interested in are points 2 and 4. Develop a critical view and really voluntarily choose to play to bet on the controversy. That is to say, the discussion. Now, in the end, we don't agree. No, we can't do this. A society which in 2040 prefers usage to purchase, imagine this is a total upheaval among consumers. It's not impossible. It's not possible. Well, by provoking that discussion, you're going to put on the table a lot of things you thought were not possible, things that were impossible even to mention, to say, etc., etc. So this is what we are trying to work on, and we have different phases. Here you have a simplified vision. We start with the present, and then you want to imagine the future. You have to look at what happened in the past. You have to look at history. For example, we know that the memory of the future is an individual's possibility and potential to project himself into the future is once he's understood the past, what happened in the past, the major upheavals, revolutions, breakthroughs, etc. So then once he's done that, he analyzes it in the present and then is able to project himself in the future. So two important things that you have to look at, the narrative, and then you do some prototyping. Now, here we look at the nanorobots, for example, and this is in the past, depression is increasing, young people are depressed, the feeling of well-being, is Really? Well, maybe depression is going to become an extraordinary mental health phenomenon. So what could we do? Well, we could think of nanorobots, nanotechnology to fight depression and have nanorobots. Someone else has invented Netflix. It's something which allows you to freeze your dreams. Now, if tomorrow we record our dreams and put them on a platform, is it great or is it a nightmare? And this is where the discussion takes place. This is where, when you think that the CEO of Netflix was that the number one enemy of Netflix was sleep. And because sleep prevents people from watching more series. So you see, we project ourselves and things are beginning to be a bit uncomfortable. So the method implies that you have to, you have to scratch people, poke, you have to see what is really possible.
And I have with me Lars, a student. We make him work. He was in a design school and he worked on a project you can see. It's called COB. And Lars, could you tell us how you started working on this design fiction project? What was the starting point? Good afternoon. So we were asked to look at a scale of 40 to 100 years. We imagined a scenario with a Third World War. A certain number of atomic bombs made life impossible on Earth. And the only survivors to, in fact, survive radiations had to go to Siberia in former methane pockets that were released in the permafrost, and they have created some underground cities. And after some time, they want to go out, and they decide, okay, fine, we are going to develop an outfit or overalls to protect ourselves from nuclear radiation. Now, we have former students or companies, private, public organizations work on a certain narrative that you can try and immerse yourself in. Now, in this case, it was a negative scenario, but you could also imagine a utopia. But anyway, so you see, you can visualize things and you project yourself in a future that's much more tangible. So to get out of this underground city, well, we have created these overalls. So it's 4 millimeters in width, and you have 2 layers of algae. One will work with photosynthetic algae, and it's going to filtrate the UV radiation and will feed the second algae layer with oxygen. And this is used as a filter for the gamma radiation. So this is all the work that was done by the students. There are hundreds of slides, let's say. And so once again, as you said, it is possible, but it is not real. Everything they've done is documented, so it's possible, but of course, the former students are not, in fact, working on a PhD. They're just thinking to put our business models, political powers under a certain stress. So you mentioned here that's the first layer. So we used, in fact, things like the blob that we already use today and we make a projection into the future. Yes, we didn't have any competence in the area of biology. It was just curiosity. And the idea is that students do that. They work for 5-6 days on this, and they can look into the scientific things that exist today, and that we can extrapolate into the future. So that's why it's interesting, is that we pushed all the cursors and we see what are the implications. And in ending, and that example is very real. It exists in Paris. So here we have a space with extreme heat under, for example, a glass, a greenhouse glass, and in there it's more than 50 degrees in the summer. Normally, the cultural institution cannot welcome people in such a temperature. But the design fiction work we've done with that cultural institution, the question that was raised was the following. If we already reach those temperatures today, what are we going to do with that space in 2030, 2040, 2050? I'm not going to describe all the scenarios, but one of them is to say, well, it's called an urban greenhouse, and we have hundreds of square meters that are available, and maybe we could create other partnerships to invite people maybe from the food industry to use these greenhouses. This would shorten the supply line and things like that. It could have a certain number of positive effects. So this is one the possible scenario that we can do, starting with such a projection. And Lars, what do you do in life? I'm developing a software to actually use AI to analyze all the political speeches that are done today. It's a software I'm working on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But stay there, because maybe there will be questions for you. Quentin, you are working in the area of materials, and Matériaux is a library of materials. Yes, it's a cabinet of curiosities in the area of materials, but it's a real material library. Yes, real materials that already exist, that you can find on the market. I'm not here to talk about the materials of tomorrow, but I can talk about materials and semi-finished products that exist today, that are operational. They are not well known because they're devoted to a specific sector, like industrial filtration or military use. But it's interesting to break partitions between the different sectors. In the packaging industry, they could be interested in something that was developed in the medical field, or someone in the fashion world can see how the army uses such a fabric that resists high temperatures, and that can also be used to charge this and that. So that is the basic idea. But there's an important point. These materials, things exist today. Now, of course, I also keep an eye on what is under development, but what we propose are things that are real. And there's an industrialist producing the material. Okay, it might be very expensive. There can be some blocking points, but at least the materials exist. Now, concerning this project, you already have materials in 2023. that can lead us to imagine that we could move in that direction one day? Now, for me, I'm here to show things to people, and I'm not here to talk about the future of these materials. Concerning trends, the future, this is not my prism, my angle. And to be honest, I smile when I see trend agencies. 2 years ago, they were talking about NFTs and Meta, and today they talk about something else. So for me, honestly, it's difficult. It's difficult to talk about the future, so I don't do that. And coming back to this example, I find very interesting, and especially if you have a basic scenario, the basic scenario being if tomorrow there are maybe fewer human beings, maybe we've had 3 bombs, what could we envisage as a use for this or that? Okay. Now, for me, on a daily basis, I see companies that emerge and they announce the exceptional material that is going to save the planet. And very often, it's just a marketing narrative. Coming back to an example mentioned in the COB, the Beltrid company. Sorry for my English here. For 10 years, they've announced spider web textiles, what they call a vegan leather. Vegan leather doesn't mean anything in my mind, based on mushrooms. And what is the result today? Well, they have stopped last July the announcement, because they've been announcing this for 10 years. They have announced they stopped everything because they were able to do buzz for 10 years with Stella McCartney, 2 or 3 luxury companies who bought that to produce watch bracelets, and that's it. But if we had stopped to think 2 seconds, about the project, and just the basic postulate saying, we have to stop using leather and we have to find alternatives to leather, substitutes. Fine, why not? I don't have any shares in the area of leather. But today there are still millions of people eating meat. We still have billions of animals, billions of waste called leather. And today people say, tomorrow we will get rid of that waste with incredible qualities. And today I have something like 50 references of what they call vegan leather. They use polyurethane with apple waste. So the problem I see is that they announce things, but they don't really think hard to know if this or that is relevant. It's more of a marketing approach in your eyes. Yes, often. Did you want to say something? Yes, we fully agree. No, we're supposed to have a lively discussion here. You cannot agree with us. Well, we agree because the projects, we don't launch them. What we have is a methodology. The design fiction is a methodology. We do not announce anything, and we're not going to market anything. And for those who know science fiction, if you look at Black Mirror, things like that, what we're interested in is not what is created in the end. It's how we're led to ask ourselves questions. How does it question our behaviors, our habits? How do we behave vis-a-vis this material? Do we feel comfortable or not? That's the use of science fiction. Beyond the object we create is our relation with that object, and it's the human vis-a-vis the projected future. So that's what you say. The animal leather, is it a real problem or not? What is the problem with it? And if we replace it with something that produces more waste, and then that gets interesting. And then we can have maybe a lively discussion. So the important thing is to ask ourselves questions. Yes. And I'm not going to criticize the designers, but, on an everyday basis, I have people who come to the showroom and very honestly, in good faith, they arrive and they say, and okay, for this pack, yes, I have environmental constraints, so I would like environmental friendly materials. And, this approach just means that I did not ask myself what an environmental friendly packaging could be, because the material, comes from the environment. So it's more what are we going to do with the material, and what will become of that material. So this is where, I don't feel comfortable, because I have someone who wants to do good, but they don't ask themselves the right questions. Now, Hélène, you're the manager of the brands and member relation pole or division at Refashion. How can waste become the new materials? Yes, this is one of the missions of Refashion, to transform the waste into a new resource. And yes, the condition is to have a lower environmental impact than the virgin material. We have materials that start with a dream, for example, the wool fiber. I think we have the people from City here. So wool fiber is something that seemed crazy, but it does work. And there are other projects that were funded by Refashion. The fact we're able to separate the footwear material to using a super critical method. At the beginning, people thought we were crazy. So sometimes the dream, it starts with a dream and then ends up in reality. But otherwise, imagining or creating new material, the idea in recycling is creating value. If we're not able to create value, it will never work. Because when we talk about financial cost or environmental impact, it wouldn't be good. So what can we do to imagine and find a solution to have new materials? And there are more and more solutions. And in the audience, we have quite a few industrialists who have a solution in terms of textile or footwear to have new materials with different characteristics. For example, a cotton t-shirt, when it's going to be recycled, it will be a new material with very nice characteristics. And what's important for Refashion when we finance this is to calculate the environmental impact and make sure that the new material will have a better environmental impact than the virgin material. Any questions here? Questions online?
Et là, oui, il y a une question, monsieur ou madame.
Yes, a question, madam. I couldn't see very well.
Je questionne justement la diversification des matériaux.
Question concerning the diversification of materials. You talk about new materials and the term waste you use. The idea would be to move away from the term waste because it's a resource, that we transform. And in the area of diversification, today we have recycling, but there we focus on some materials and those materials for which we have a certain volume. How can we take into consideration the new materials that arrive on the market, but that represent a lower volume, and how can we reintroduce them in a production line that does not exist today? Because already we use, for example, mechanical recycling, and there we can have a lower environmental impact compared to a chemical process. So you talk about this showroom with a lot of innovative materials, what do you think of that? And this idea of putting on the market these products with a new value? Well, my first reaction would be, the meaning of the words. It's difficult for me to talk about new materials because we have tables, we produce materials, and when we talk about new materials, we talk about new semi-finished products and not really new material. And for example, my t-shirt is in cotton, and with that, I'm going to produce a panel. I will press it. I'll put a bio-sourced resin. That's not a new material. It's a new semi-finished product using basic material, and it's more complex than before. Now, before I had cotton, now I have cotton mixed with a resin, X or Y. And this is where we come to your point, multiplying not the materials, but the existing products and the complexity to recycle that afterwards, because one of the challenges in recycling is already to identify the material and, if possible, to recover virgin material or close to virgin material. And it is that sandwich that we have to look at. So what logic should we use? Maybe a single material approach rather than mixing a whole series of things. At least maybe this should be the trend. And this is the thought of reflection I find relevant. Let's think about something that is aiming more at one single material. Then it's not the discussion between this material that is good and that material is bad. No, to do my ski shoe, maybe it's better to use one sort of plastic rather than three. So instead of talking about the multiple materials, we could see what is the most relevant material for a given product. You approve? Well, I agree for new products. For new products, yes, we should move towards a single material. All the phases after that will simplify things. So we'd love to have single materials, whatever the product. But the reality is different. We have to manage whatever the name we give it, the end of life of the product or the second life or third life of a product. We have to handle a large volume of multiple materials. And some of them, we know how to manage them. We know how to sort them. If we don't sort them, we can reintroduce them in products, insulating products, for example, that will be able to recycle afterwards. We have a certain number of players here in this room. The insulation products have made a lot of progress over 10 years or 20 years, and it's no longer basic materials. It's highly performing materials, and we can recycle them even more than once. In the same way, for multiple materials, we're able to separate cotton and polyester. We can separate or sort, but as of three, when you have three materials together, it's more difficult. And there, it's difficult to identify them and also to separate them. So if there is one message for the designers and product designers, one material, okay, two materials, okay, but after that, too much, too complicated. Now, in design fiction, what's good is to put people together who completely disagree. But your question is interesting because, yes, we imagine the future with the metaverse and the helmet, and we'll have a chip behind our ears or whatever. So this is the way we imagine the future. But the projects we like we actually push these students, former students and companies to look at low tech. You know, maybe things could be simpler. Maybe we do not need to invent something more, and we don't need to add another layer. That's easy to say, you know, and when you project yourself in the future where you compare the root of the new material and the others, that's not as easy. So it's also interesting to work on that and think about all that. The COB project lasts how many materials? That's a tricky question. We had the blob, two types of algae, lead, tungsten, graphene.
Bon, c'est pas mal, mais du coup, ça rentre plus forcément dans cette
okay, so multiple materials. The question, it's more to contribute to the discussion here. We've already produced enough fibers. You know, we produce fibers and we produce textile we could have clothes for 5 generations. So, you know, reusing the fibers, well, we're going to improve the reuse, but there's also the new materials and the other types of leather. There's one thing we should be aware of, and you said it just before, we see this as a source and something we valorize, but for other industries, they see this as waste. So, in fact, you know, we have to be careful with this tendency to overproduce. You see, for example, the orange juice we import for Florida, it travels all around the world, and then we produce materials with the orange peels. But, you know, that's not the right approach. We should, it is, well, we can use the overproduction, but it should not serve as an excuse to go on overproducing in another industry. And this is why, you know, people like you are so useful, Quentin. Well, I fully agree. When I was asked to participate to this conference this afternoon, and people said, and for you, Quentin, the material of the future, well, for me, the material of the future is less material. That's the first point before we talk about graphene, nanotubes, less material. And the rest for me is an anecdote. You know, we are faced with a real systemic issue, and it is not with a new type of leather or something like that we're going to change anything. So I fully agree with you when I gave the example of leather, which is a waste today. When we talk about leather, in fact, 97% of the leather is from cattle or sheep. So that's is the waste we use to produce leather. But if, as of tomorrow, there are fewer people who like meat, fine, there'll be less leather, and maybe then it would be interesting to have an alternative material for leather. And I go even further. So for some projects, it is better to use a synthetic leather than a real one. Leather is a waste. There's also the whole tanning process that is not that great either. But what I'm saying is that if I want shoes, and if I want my shoes to last 5 years, which is, I think, the right approach, well, today, it's not with the Milo that will last 3 months. I need to use leather if I'm not vegan. If I'm vegan, it's another discussion. But vegan and environmentalists today is seen as the same thing, but it's not. But anyway, I think that it is important because it's very urgent. We have to ask ourselves the real questions, and we should not, in fact, decide to go on. Okay, we'll go on with fast fashion, but we'll use organic cotton. No, it's the model. It's the model we have to look at. This is why I found the discussion before ours very interesting, because I think it is essential today to think about repairing products, to think about second-hand, all these things that make it possible to limit the depletion of resources. And we should go on producing and producing and producing. That is the real challenge today. It's a real challenge for all industries. I agree. I fully agree. Reduction, yes, repairing, reusing, and with the inventories we have, what do we do with the inventories, and how do we make new resources, and what are the means that are least impacting but also most efficient to recreate products that are repairable and sustainable? So this is where we are today, circular economy.
Il nous reste 5 minutes, en gros.
We have 5 minutes left. Are there any questions? A last hand? No? Because otherwise I'm giving the floor to Adrien. So do I give it? No, Adrien, on repair. Well, as far as repair is concerned, I think there's some very interesting things for you as well. Today, repair in the methodology of design fiction is a weak signal. You know, Patagonia repairs, a few brands repairs them. I'm not a specialist, so I'm probably forgetting many things and many brands. This weak signal, you can, in fact, work on it to transform it into a major trend. That is to say, all of the industry and its players move towards repair. The question, 2030, 2040, 2050, what would this imply for each one of you here? You, in your part of the value chain, the retailer, maybe 25, 40, 50, 60, 80% of the store is dedicated to repairs. That means 25, 40, 50, 60, 80% of our salesmen or repairs. Well, and now the problem is we need repairs, so we don't have them, so you have to train them. It means in the schools, you're going to have to review things. So what I'm saying is that the design fiction studio, in fact, allows us to work on this, push towards a major trend. Once the industry and the value chain has moved in that direction, what happens? So it's the exercise of thinking like Einstein to try to discover new laws on how we're going to work together. Véronique, as far as new materials are concerned, there were not the questions here. I know there are a lot of people in the market here and people who, in fact, say to me, we don't have new materials. No, we don't have these semi-finished products. How do we integrate those semi-finished products or these simile products as well? So, you know, there are laws which encourage the integration of materials that are used materials in products, and they have to come from a certain distance maximum. So how do you integrate that into your chain? That means the answer is that you must work with Refashion. We're here to accompany you in your experimentation, and we can simulate the integration of these simile products, these new materials, etc. Now, between the semi-finished product and the finished product, there's a certain fine-tuning. This is going to integrate the product manager. His intermediary is the material manufacturer, someone else who's doing the finishing, etc. So how do we work in these three different steps? Well, for these three steps, you can work with Refashion to fine-tune this. You haven't asked the question, but I'd like to pass on the message. Yes, fine. In fact, the discussion is just beginning and it will continue. So your R word. For me, it would be think. In French, is with an R, think. You know, to reflect on, to think on. I go further. I think people would have to exercise their sense of criticism. Maybe what we're saying is true, but maybe it's a bit of bullshit, quote unquote, says the speaker. But we have to think and we have to be critical in our thinking to try to humbly do less evil. Word, wake up people's imagination. That in French it would be with an R. Wake up. Maybe refined. Okay, refined. All right, refined. Well, as far as this session is recreate with the play on word in French, recreation. Thank you very much. Congratulations for this round table and for these words. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm going to accompany you to the door if you like. What a wealth of information. We're not totally finished. We have 5-6 minutes left. Just enough time for me to ask for the projection of the cloud, the word cloud. So here's our word cloud. You can continue to enter your words online as well. Don't forget to also give us your feedback on this session, with the satisfaction survey. I hear people laugh, so there must be some funny words up there. And the time has come for me to simply say that this session is available on replay, and I would like to ask you to applaud Maud Hardy. Thank you. Thank you. What a day. Thank you to all of you here and those who are connected online. So thank you to those who came here today to spend the day with us. I would like to thank Éloi Choplin. I would like to thank all of the speakers, Sandra, Inès, Adèle, Véronique. I think you've all been excellent. And thank you, Éloi. Yes, yes. Now, it's up to me to conclude these 6 hours of considerable work that we've done together. So, we opened the session this morning on a future which would be desirable and tangible. We heard, in fact, Sébastien, and we heard, in fact, Navi, who said we would succeed if we were creative, open. We must, in fact, have new reference groups emerge to reconcile. The major concept is cooperation. All the initiatives, all the efforts, all of the experimentation and cooperation is key. We are working with others no matter what our activity. We are here today and you on a remote basis as professionals is in this sector, which is textiles, household linens, and footwear. It is our responsibility to build the future. I ask all of you to commit to do this together. And we at Refashion and the technical team you've met today, we are here to accompany you in your transformation. You can count on us. We will dedicate our efforts every day alongside of you. I'll stop here with my 2 keywords: to meet all of us together to succeed. Thank you for being here today. We'll meet again next year, same place. And I wish you a future that is tangible and a success, and it starts as of tomorrow. See you next year.